The city of Delaware was quiet on that cold winter morning. Snow covered the streets, and the sky was a dull shade of gray. The sun had barely risen when a call came into the police department. A janitor at the station had found a body in one of the offices. The report was brief but urgent. Officers rushed to the scene, unaware of the dark secret they were about to uncover. The victim was a woman in her early 30s. She was lying on the floor, her body stiff and cold. Blood had pooled beneath her head, staining the carpet a deep red. Her face was pale, her eyes wide open. She had been dead for several hours. There was no sign of struggle, no obvious weapon in sight. Her clothes were neat, her hair undisturbed. Something about the scene felt carefully arranged, too perfect to be natural. The officers immediately secured the area. Yellow tape was stretched across the doorway, keeping curious eyes away. Forensic experts arrived within minutes, taking photographs and collecting samples. The smell of death lingered in the air, mixing with the scent of stale coffee from the break room down the hall. Detective Samuel Graham was assigned to the case. He was a seasoned investigator with over 20 years on the force. He had seen his fair share of crime, but something about this case felt different. The victim was identified as Julia Reynolds, a secretary who had worked at the station for 5 years. She was well-liked and known for her efficiency and professionalism. There was no known reason for anyone to want her dead. Graham examined the body carefully. There were no bruises on her arms or neck. Her lips were slightly parted, her expression frozen in fear. Her right hand was clenched into a fist. He pried it open gently, revealing a small piece of torn fabric. It was dark blue, possibly from a suit jacket. A crucial piece of evidence, but it was too early to draw conclusions. The medical examiner arrived and began his preliminary assessment. He estimated the time of death to be between midnight and 2 in the morning. There were no gunshot wounds, no stab marks. Poisoning was a possibility, but further testing would be needed to confirm. The lack of blood spatter suggested she had not been attacked violently. Perhaps she had been drugged, then struck on the head. The cause of death remained uncertain. Detective Graham turned his attention to the office itself. The desk was tidy, with stacks of paperwork neatly arranged. A computer monitor was still on, the screen showing an open email inbox. Nothing appeared out of place. The only odd detail was a missing chair. There was an indentation on the carpet where a chair should have been, but it was gone. Had someone removed it to cover their tracks? Security footage would be crucial in understanding what had happened. The station had cameras in the hallways, but none inside individual offices. Graham ordered the footage from the past 12 hours to be reviewed. If anyone had entered or left Julia's office during the night, they would find out. As the investigation progressed, Graham began speaking with colleagues who had last seen Julia. Most described her as quiet and hard-working. She had left the station around 6 p.m. the previous evening and was not scheduled to work overnight. Why had she returned so late? And who had been with her when she died? An unsettling thought crossed Graham's mind. The crime had taken place inside a police station, a place meant to be safe. The killer had either entered unnoticed or was someone who belonged there. If the latter was true, then the suspect could be one of their own. With no clear answers yet, Graham knew this case would require careful attention. A woman had been murdered in the heart of the police department, and whoever had done it had taken great care to hide the truth. He would need to move quickly before evidence was lost, or before the killer had a chance to strike again. The forensic team worked late into the morning, processing the crime scene for any overlooked details. The blood on the carpet was carefully collected for analysis, and the small piece of torn fabric found in Julia's hand was sent to the lab for examination. Detective Graham knew that every detail mattered, no matter how small. The security footage review began, led by Officer Patel, an expert in surveillance analysis. Hours of recordings were scanned for suspicious activity. At precisely 11:47 p.m., Julia was seen entering the station alone. She looked around cautiously before heading toward her office. Less than 10 minutes later, a shadowy figure appeared at the far end of the hallway. The footage was grainy, making identification difficult, but the person was wearing a dark blue suit, the same color as the fabric found in Julia's hand. Graham noted the figure's movements. The person hesitated near Julia's office, seemingly checking their surroundings. Then they entered. The door closed behind them, and for the next 30 minutes nothing was visible. At 12:26 a.m., the door opened again. The figure stepped out, adjusting their jacket before walking briskly toward the exit. Julia never reappeared. The detective rewound the footage, analyzing the figure's build. The person was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with confidence. Graham jotted down details, knowing that this could be their killer. Meanwhile, the medical examiner provided preliminary toxicology results. Traces of sedatives were found in Julia's system. It confirmed a suspicion: she had likely been drugged before she was killed. The lack of defensive wounds suggested she had been too weak to fight back. The missing chair was also being investigated. A janitor mentioned seeing an abandoned chair in a supply closet, which Graham immediately retrieved. A closer look revealed faint smudges of blood on the armrests. Someone had moved the chair to avoid leaving evidence behind. The killer had been methodical, but small mistakes were beginning to surface. With more questions than answers, Graham turned his attention to Julia's recent interactions. Her emails revealed an ongoing exchange with someone labeled only as C. The messages were cryptic, but they suggested a relationship beyond professionalism. One of the last emails Julia sent read, "We need to talk. This can't stay a secret forever." The detective's instincts sharpened. Someone had wanted Julia silenced. He needed to find out who C was before it was too late. The evidence was beginning to speak, and Carter was ready to listen. Meanwhile, the detective sat in his dimly lit office, reviewing the security footage once more. The figure in the dark blue suit was careful, moving with a deliberate pace. The way they adjusted their jacket before exiting suggested familiarity with law enforcement procedures. Whoever this was, they had taken precautions, but not enough to escape unnoticed. Officer Patel knocked on the door and entered with the lab results. The torn fabric found in Julia's hand was a high-quality wool blend, commonly used in expensive suits. A search of department-issued uniforms confirmed that none matched the material. This suggested the killer was someone with authority, someone who could afford such clothing. Further analysis of Julia's emails revealed that C was someone within the police force. A subpoena for her phone records showed late-night calls to an unregistered number. With assistance from the tech department, Graham traced the number to an encrypted phone, one used exclusively by Captain Richard Lawson. The revelation was shocking. Captain Lawson was well respected, a man known for his leadership, but the evidence was pointing directly at him. Graham needed more proof before making a move. He requested Lawson's work schedule and noted that he had been in the station that night, staying late for an alleged meeting that had no official record. The pieces were falling into place. Graham was closing in on his suspect, but he knew confronting a police captain would be dangerous. He needed an airtight case, one that no one could deny. Detective Graham compiled all the evidence he had gathered. The fabric, the footage, the toxicology report, all pointed toward Captain Lawson. Yet, he knew suspicions were not enough. He needed undeniable proof. The case required a deeper dive into Lawson's personal life and professional conduct. Graham ordered background checks, searched financial records, and began interviewing people close to Lawson, hoping to uncover the missing piece that would seal the case. Records revealed that Lawson had made a large cash withdrawal days before Julia's death. His personal bank statements showed unusual transactions, including payments to and from unknown recipients. When this inflow of money was investigated, it was discovered to be for bribe. The captain had been taking bribes and getting involved in illegal activities. When Julia found out, she confronted him. and he told her to stay out of it and that it was none of her business. Julia thought it was wrong, and she was going to speak out, not minding their relationship, as his activities would foster more crimes in the city instead of curbing them. The captain got angry and warned her never to speak about it again. On the night of the murder, he approached her to ask if she wanted coffee. Julia affirmed his gesture, unaware that the captain had spiked her drink with a sedative. She brought up the bribery issue. He warned her to stay away from bigger issues. When he moved closer to her desk, he found out she was typing to the FBI about the corruption and bribery case. The captain got angry and hit Julia with a heavy blow, throwing her off her chair before slamming her head to the wall. He deleted what Julia had been typing. When he had confirmed her dead, he left quietly. Graham suspected these could be related to Julia, possibly blackmail money. Digging deeper, he found that Lawson had been having an affair with Julia for over a year. Witnesses described seeing them together in secret meetings. A former colleague of Julia's came forward, revealing she had confided in her about ending the affair. Julia had planned to expose Lawson. The case was growing stronger. Graham needed one final piece of evidence to confirm Lawson's guilt. Reviewing Lawson's car records, he found GPS data showing he had driven near Julia's apartment multiple times before her death. With this, Graham prepared for the next step, confronting Captain Lawson. Detective Graham gathered every piece of evidence and prepared for the inevitable confrontation. He summoned Captain Lawson to an internal meeting under the pretense of reviewing security protocols. Lawson, appearing calm, walked into the room with the same composure he always carried. Graham observed him closely, searching for any sign of unease. Graham laid the evidence before him piece by piece. He presented the surveillance footage, the torn fabric, the toxicology report, and the financial transactions. Each detail formed a chain that pointed directly to Lawson. The captain remained silent, his expression growing tense with every revelation. As the weight of the evidence pressed down, Lawson's confidence wavered. He tried to argue that the meeting with Julia was innocent, that their relationship was a misunderstanding. But when Graham revealed Julia's emails, in which she had threatened to expose some message in her draft about the corruption case the captain had been involved, Lawson's mask slipped. The silence in the room became unbearable. The truth was undeniable. Lawson exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. Then, in a low voice, he confessed. He had confronted Julia that night, pleading with her to stay silent. But she refused. Fearful of losing his career and reputation, he acted in desperation. A single blow to the head ended her life. As Graham listened, he felt no triumph. Justice had been served, but at what cost? A trusted leader had fallen, and an innocent woman had lost her life. Officers entered the room and placed Lawson under arrest. The station, once a place of order, now bore the weight of scandal and betrayal. Graham knew this case would leave scars on the department for years to come. The news of Captain Lawson's arrest spread through the police department like wildfire. Officers whispered in the hallways, disbelief written on their faces. A man they had trusted and respected was now in handcuffs. The weight of the scandal was heavy, casting a shadow over the entire department. Graham watched as Lawson was led away. Reporters swarmed the entrance of the station, eager for a statement. The police chief held a press conference, assuring the public that justice would be served. Trust in the department had been shaken, and it would take time to rebuild. For Graham, the case was over, but the consequences would linger. Julia Reynolds had sought justice, but it had cost her life. The truth had been uncovered, yet the damage was irreversible. The station, once a place of law and order, would now be remembered as the site of betrayal and murder. The officers struggled with mixed emotions. Some refused to believe their captain was guilty. Others felt betrayed, questioning how they had failed to see the truth sooner. The department underwent an internal review, ensuring that no one else had been complicit in covering up Lawson's crime. Meanwhile, Graham spent his time writing his final report. Every detail had to be documented, every piece of evidence, every interview, every conclusion. It was a painstaking process, but it was necessary. This case would be studied for years to come, a lesson in how even those in power could fall. As he typed, Graham reflected on the burden of justice. No one was above the law, not even those sworn to uphold it. The case had ended, but the ripples would continue. Julia Reynolds had died seeking the truth, and in the end, her voice had been heard. The trial of Captain Lawson became one of the most highly publicized cases in recent history. The courtroom was packed with reporters, colleagues, and members of the public, all eager to witness justice unfold. As the evidence was meticulously presented, the depth of Lawson's deception became undeniably clear. Witness testimonies, forensic reports, and surveillance footage painted a grim picture of a man who had sacrificed everything to protect his own secrets. The prosecution argued that Lawson had manipulated Julia into returning to the station, knowing the late hour would limit potential witnesses. He had eliminated her with calculated precision, ensuring that no immediate evidence would directly link him to the crime. However, small mistakes, like the torn fabric in her hand and the missing chair, the message she saved in her draft a few days before her death, ultimately unraveled his alibi. After weeks of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict: guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced Lawson to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His fall from grace was absolute. Once a respected leader, he was now a prisoner, stripped of his badge and authority. The police department faced an uphill battle in restoring public trust. Internal policies were scrutinized, and reforms were implemented to prevent such breaches from happening again. Officers who had once admired Lawson now struggled to reconcile the man they knew with the murderer he had become. Detective Graham, though relieved that justice had been served, felt the weight of the case linger. Julia Reynolds had sought the truth, and though she had paid the ultimate price, her story had not been buried. The echoes of her tragedy remained, a somber reminder that power and authority did not place anyone above the law. As Graham filed away his final report, he knew that this case would stay with him forever. The station, though forever changed, continued its work. Justice had prevailed, but the scars would never fully heal. The case was closed, but the lessons would endure. Thank you for listening to True Crime Pulse. Share your thoughts on the story. Like and subscribe to the channel. Until the next episode, when we bring you more crime stories, stay vigilant.